Hello, today, as always, we are embarking on a journey into one of history's most enduring mysteries. Our story begins in London's East End, in the year 1888, a place where the air felt heavy with coal smoke, desperation, and the restless murmurs of thousands struggling to survive. Whitechapel was overcrowded, its maze of narrow streets filled with the clatter of carts, drunken shouts, and the constant hum of people who had nowhere else to go. Beneath this noisy surface, however, lay a deeper current of unease. Women walked quickly with their eyes lowered. Men glanced over their shoulders more often than usual. Rumors traveled faster than the fog that clung to the cobblestones at dusk. People whispered about strange footsteps heard behind them at night, about a dark figure seen lingering at corners where the gas lamps flickered. It was a time when poverty pushed many into dangerous paths, where the night offered both escape and threat. And somewhere within that heavy fog, someone was watching, someone who chose his victims silently, without warning. No one knew who he was, yet his presence was felt like a cold breath on the back of the neck. Before long, the world would fear his name. But here, in these dim streets, his story was just beginning. This is the birthplace of one of the most chilling legends in history, the phantom killer who would come to be known as Jack the Ripper. Whitechapel was a neighborhood of contrasts, teeming with life yet shadowed by despair. Narrow alleys connected rows of cramped tenements, each window revealing a world of struggle, children huddled near the stove, laundresses folding wet clothes, men rubbing their tired eyes after long shifts in factories or docks. The streets were alive with the clamor of market sellers, the rattle of carts, and the occasional shout of a drunken patron spilling out from dimly lit taverns. In the evening, fog rolled in, thick and suffocating, muffling the distant bells of St. Mary's and turning familiar streets into mazes of shadows. For the women of Whitechapel, life was especially perilous. Many walked alone to their work, their pace hurried, hands clutching purses and shawls against the cold. It was in this world of ordinary struggles and hidden dangers that the first whispers of a sinister presence began to take shape, a killer whose precise, brutal actions would shake even the most hardened residents of the East End. They could not yet imagine how fear would soon dominate their lives. The ordinary rhythm of life was about to be shattered by a darkness no one could name. The night of August 31st, 1888, changed Whitechapel forever. Mary and Polly Nichols, a young woman struggling to survive, became the first known victim of a series of brutal killings that would terrify the district. Found in Bucks Row, her body was mutilated in a way that shocked even the most seasoned police officers. It was a killing executed with precision, suggesting someone with anatomical knowledge, someone methodical and terrifyingly detached. The newspapers immediately seized upon the horror, feeding a public eager to know the details. Rumors spread like wildfire, and the shadow of a mysterious killer began to loom over every dark alley. People whispered about a man in the fog, a specter with no name, moving silently, and yet leaving evidence of his gruesome deeds. For the residents of Whitechapel, the streets that once felt familiar now seemed alien and dangerous, and the once mundane task of walking home after work became a journey into fear. That night, the legend of Jack the Ripper quietly began to take root. The police response was immediate but chaotic. Scotland Yard dispatched detectives to survey the crime scene, interview witnesses, and attempt to understand a killer whose methods seemed beyond comprehension. Constables scoured the foggy streets, questioning terrified locals and prostitutes who had seen suspicious figures in alleys. The media, hungry for sensational stories, portrayed the killer as an almost supernatural entity, adding fear to confusion. Detective inspectors meticulously documented every detail, yet despite their efforts, clues were scarce and often contradictory. Fingerprints were rudimentary, no cameras existed, and the killer had vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, the people of Whitechapel attempted to continue their lives, but the sense of omnipresent danger was palpable. Every shadowed corner, every whispered footstep, could signal the arrival of the unknown predator. The hunt had begun, and so had a period of uncertainty and paranoia that would grip London for months. Annie Chapman's murder, occurring on September 8, 1888, shocked London even more deeply. Found in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street, her body revealed the same gruesome precision as Polly Nichols, yet the violence had escalated. The killer's signature, meticulous mutilation, was unmistakable. Chapman had been a local prostitute struggling to survive, much like so many women in Whitechapel. The nature of the murder suggested someone with anatomical knowledge, perhaps a butcher or surgeon, and it caused immediate public panic. Residents avoided dark streets, men and women alike walked with heightened caution, and nightly curfews became an unspoken rule. Newspapers fueled hysteria, portraying the Ripper as an almost mythical figure. With each murder, the killer's legend grew, and the collective fear tightened its grip on the East End. London had become a city under siege, not by armies or fire, but by a shadow whose face no one knew, whose methods terrified all who dared to walk the foggy streets. Fear spread rapidly throughout London. Every alley, every gaslit street corner became suspect. Prostitutes refused to work, and taverns were less crowded as the rumor of a relentless killer haunted daily life. Parents kept children indoors, and the police were inundated with reports of suspicious men, most of them false leads. The newspapers, seizing the public's appetite for terror, published lurid details of the killings, exaggerating and sensationalizing events. Citizens began to lock doors earlier than ever before. The Ripper's anonymity made him omnipresent. He could be anywhere and nowhere at once. Even those with no direct connection to Whitechapel felt the grip of fear. London had become a city held hostage by imagination and rumor, a place where every shadow was a threat and every unknown sound a possible death knell. By late September, the public and the police received taunting letters purportedly from the killer. The most infamous, the Dear Boss letter, claimed responsibility for the murders and signed ominously as Jack the Ripper. Whether authentic or a hoax, the letter intensified public fear and captivated the media. Londoners speculated endlessly about the author's identity, motives, and whereabouts. The police faced unprecedented scrutiny, accused of incompetence while the killer remained invisible. Citizens became armchair detectives, drawing sketches, debating theories, and reporting every minor suspicion. The Ripper's communication, whether real or fabricated, transformed him into more than a murderer. He became a symbol of terror, a legend that grew with every passing day. The streets of Whitechapel were no longer just dangerous, they were haunted by a name that would echo through history. On the night of September 30, 1888, Elizabeth Stride, a woman known locally as Long Liz, became one of the Ripper's victims, or so it seemed. Found in Dutfield's yard, her body displayed less mutilation than previous victims, leading some to speculate that the killer was interrupted. The discovery sparked immediate fear and confusion. Londoners were left questioning if there was more than one murderer, or if the same individual had been thwarted in his deadly intent. Stride had lived a life marked by hardship, like so many women in Whitechapel, working long hours, navigating streets filled with fog and danger, striving simply to survive another day. The fact that she fell victim to such violence, in such a public yet hidden place, sent ripples of terror through the East End. Witnesses reported a fleeting figure near the scene, glimpsed only in the corner of the eye, vanishing into the mist. The police once again were confronted with the same chilling reality, an invisible predator whose motives, methods, and identity remained entirely unknown. For the people of London, the streets had become a theater of fear, where each night could bring an encounter with a shadow that had no name but a terrifying presence. The legend of Jack the Ripper was growing, his infamy fueled by the panic and despair of a city trapped in uncertainty. Just hours after Elizabeth Stride was found, Catherine Eddowes, another young woman struggling to survive in Whitechapel, was discovered in Mitre Square. Her body showed horrifying mutilations, more severe than any previous victim, marking a chilling escalation in the killer's brutality. The mutilations were precise, almost surgical, suggesting a familiarity with anatomy that both fascinated and horrified the investigators. The streets surrounding Mitre Square, usually filled with workers leaving late-night factories or wandering home from pubs, now bore the weight of an almost palpable fear. Citizens spoke of eerie sounds, footsteps that disappeared into the fog, whispers that seemed to follow them along darkened lanes. Catherine Eddowes' murder intensified speculation among detectives, who debated whether they were dealing with a singular murderer or multiple killers. Newspapers described the act in vivid, sensationalized detail, stoking public panic and fascination. The Ripper's identity remained a complete mystery, yet his presence was undeniable. Londoners realized that life in the East End would never be the same. The foggy streets, once familiar, had become corridors of terror. Every creak of a door, every shadow cast by a flickering lamp, could conceal the predator who had made Whitechapel his hunting ground. The legend of Jack the Ripper continued to grow with every newspaper headline, every fearful whisper, and every sleepless night. The night of September 30, 1888, would later be remembered as the double event, a terrifying sequence that changed the Ripper case forever. Two women, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, fell victim within hours of one another. The juxtaposition of these murders showcased the killer's unpredictability. Stride was interrupted, possibly escaping full mutilation, while Eddowes suffered a horrific, precise attack. The authorities were overwhelmed, caught between immediate response and public panic. Londoners, already gripped by fear, now realized the killer was bold, operating in broad daylight and under the cover of night. Residents whispered about the impossibility of avoiding this predator, who seemed to move effortlessly among the shadows, invisible yet omnipresent. The double event not only heightened public hysteria but also intensified the pressure on Scotland Yard. Citizens demanded swift action, newspapers demanded sensational details. For detectives, each step became a delicate dance between observation and speculation, as every alley could hide the Ripper, and every passerby could be a witness or a target. The East End was no longer merely a district, it had become a stage for terror, and the Ripper, its unseen director. With the double event dominating headlines, Scotland Yard faced unprecedented scrutiny. Detectives worked tirelessly, following leads, interviewing witnesses, and poring over crime scenes. Yet despite their dedication, progress was painfully slow. The Ripper left no fingerprints, no identifying marks, and vanished into the fog with uncanny ease. Citizens flooded the police with tips, some credible, most misleading, but the sheer volume of information only compounded the difficulty of solving the case. The public's fear transformed into frustration, and newspapers criticized law enforcement relentlessly, demanding arrests and answers. Meanwhile, the killer's anonymity only amplified his legend, making every Londoner feel as though the predator could strike anywhere at any time. Police officers patrolled the foggy streets in increasing numbers, yet even the most vigilant could do little against a murderer who seemed to blend seamlessly into the night. The East End had become a chessboard, and the Ripper, an invisible master, several moves ahead. The pressure on authorities would intensify as each subsequent murder deepened the mystery and magnified public terror. The final canonical victim, Mary Jane Kelly, represents the horrifying climax of the Ripper's spree. Found in her small, sparsely furnished room in Miller's Court on November 9, 1888, her body bore mutilations more grotesque and extensive than any previous victim. Unlike the other murders committed in public or semi-public locations, Kelly was attacked in the privacy of her home, signaling the killer's audacity and escalation. Her tiny room, filled with personal belongings and makeshift comforts, became a stage for an unimaginable act of violence. The brutality and precision suggested a methodical mind, one that understood anatomy and reveled in control. Her murder shook London to its core. People were now aware that the Ripper could strike anywhere, not just in the foggy streets of Whitechapel. Fear extended into homes, and the notion of safety became an illusion. Detectives documented every detail, yet answers remained elusive. Mary Jane Kelly's death cemented the Ripper's infamy, leaving his city in mourning and a legacy of terror that would echo through history. The East End, once bustling with life, was now shadowed permanently by the legend of Jack the Ripper, a figure as enigmatic as he was terrifying. The murders of Jack the Ripper captured the imagination of the public like no crime before. Newspapers, hungry for sensational stories, printed lurid accounts of each killing, sometimes exaggerating the horrors for maximum effect. Headlines screamed from the pages, "The Fiend of Whitechapel strikes again," or "Blood on the cobblestones, another victim of the Ripper." The media frenzy was relentless, feeding both fear and fascination. Londoners devoured every article, discussing theories in pubs and marketplaces, analyzing the Ripper's supposed motives and skills. Some suggested he was a doctor or butcher, others speculated he was insane, a supernatural entity, or even a member of the upper class hiding behind respectable society. Letters claiming to be from the killer were printed in newspapers, some authentic, many hoaxes. This constant media presence magnified the terror, as every reader wondered whether the next attack would strike their neighborhood, their street, or their home. Newspapers turned the killer into a legend before the police could even identify him, creating a climate where the shadow of the Ripper loomed over every dark corner of the East End, an invisible hand guiding fear through the hearts of the public. The relentless pressure on Scotland Yard intensified. Detectives were scrutinized not only by the public but also by officials demanding swift justice. Every murder amplified criticism, and every false lead frustrated investigators. Officers patrolled the foggy streets tirelessly, questioning witnesses, following tips, and documenting minutiae with painstaking care. Yet, the Ripper remained elusive. Evidence was minimal, sometimes contradictory, and the sheer randomness of attacks made patterns difficult to discern. Each new murder felt like a personal failure for those charged with protecting London. Rumors about the killer's identity circulated endlessly, some accusing outsiders, some influential men. Police strategies evolved, with patrols increasing at night and special units formed to focus on the case. Still, the Ripper's ability to strike suddenly and vanish into the fog demonstrated a level of cunning and preparation that confounded even the most experienced officers. The East End, already steeped in poverty and crime, became a laboratory for fear and frustration, where detectives were trapped between public expectation and the invisible predator haunting the streets. As fear gripped London, the hunt for suspects intensified. Thousands of leads poured into Scotland Yard, some credible, most misleading. Names circulated in newspapers and in hushed conversations in pubs: doctors, butchers, immigrants, and even local aristocrats. Citizens claimed to have glimpsed suspicious figures in the fog, yet nothing conclusive ever emerged. Detectives debated motivations. Was the killer seeking revenge, or was it a psychological compulsion that drove him to such brutality? Some letters claiming to be from the Ripper misled investigators, feeding suspicion on innocent men. The anonymity of the murderer created a climate of paranoia, where every shadow seemed sinister and every stranger a potential threat. The inability to identify the Ripper despite exhaustive investigations magnified public fear, making Londoners acutely aware that the predator could be anyone, anywhere, blending seamlessly into everyday life. In the East End, suspicion became a currency, and rumor a weapon, as the city tried to understand a criminal whose existence seemed both real and mythic. The correspondence claiming to be from the Ripper played a central role in escalating fear. Letters addressed to newspapers taunted the police and flaunted the killer's perceived cleverness. The infamous Dear Boss letter, signed Jack the Ripper, described the murders with chilling casualness, detailing acts of violence that horrified and fascinated the public simultaneously. Scotland Yard faced a dilemma: were these letters genuine or hoaxes designed to incite panic? Each published letter further terrified the population and gave the murderer notoriety far beyond what mere crimes could achieve. The press eagerly printed every word, creating a feedback loop in which the Ripper's legend grew with each passing day. Citizens, meanwhile, scrutinized every man on the street, fearful that the person next to them might be the monster responsible for the atrocities. The letters, real or fake, became a tool of terror, demonstrating the power of words to amplify fear, and establishing the Ripper as a figure who controlled not only action but perception, a shadow that extended beyond the alleys into the very psyche of London. As the murders continued, fear permeated every layer of Whitechapel and beyond. Streets that once bustled with life fell quiet after dusk, shopkeepers shuttered windows earlier, and residents avoided nighttime travel whenever possible. Prostitutes, especially vulnerable to attack, became increasingly scarce on the streets, and many women relied on companions for safety. Rumors, speculation, and gossip swirled through the East End, amplifying terror with each retelling. Even areas seemingly distant from Whitechapel felt the psychological weight of the Ripper's reign. The shadow of his crimes stretched across London, a reminder that safety was never guaranteed. Police presence increased, yet the public remained skeptical, aware that the murderer had evaded capture repeatedly. This pervasive fear transformed daily life, dictating behavior, and creating a society in which every alley, every corner, and every unknown passerby could harbor danger. Jack the Ripper was no longer just a killer, he had become a symbol of unseen horror, shaping the rhythms and routines of a city trapped under the suffocating weight of dread. Scotland Yard focused on the growing list of suspects, hoping to catch the elusive killer. Witness reports, though numerous, were often contradictory, leaving detectives struggling to separate fact from fiction. Some men were questioned multiple times, others disappeared without explanation. Doctors, butchers, and even local immigrants were brought under scrutiny. The police painstakingly mapped the locations of each murder, seeking patterns that might reveal the Ripper's identity. At night, constables roamed the streets, questioning strangers and observing the shadows for signs of the murderer. The challenge was immense. The killer seemed to anticipate patrols, striking with calculated precision and vanishing into the thick fog. Rumors spread faster than the investigators could confirm, leading to hysteria and false accusations. The inability to identify the perpetrator fed public frustration and fear. Every shadow became suspect, every stranger a potential murderer. This relentless tension defined the East End, as the citizens navigated the streets with caution, acutely aware that the Ripper was still at large, hidden among them. Each new tip became a potential breakthrough, yet the Ripper remained as enigmatic as ever, a phantom whose presence dominated both the physical streets and the imaginations of all who dwelled there. The pervasive fear gripped every corner of Whitechapel. Residents modified their routines, avoiding streets after dark and traveling in groups whenever possible. Shops closed earlier, and street vendors packed up quickly as the fog rolled in. Prostitutes, who had been the Ripper's primary targets, increasingly disappeared from the streets, either hiding or working in safer areas. Even those with no direct connection to Whitechapel felt the tension, as rumors of the killer spread throughout London. Footsteps echoing on cobblestones, shadows flickering in gaslight, and sudden noises became triggers for panic. Parents kept children inside, while shopkeepers boarded windows to protect their families. Every act, no matter how mundane, was now filtered through the lens of potential danger. The Ripper had transformed the East End into a psychological battlefield, where fear dictated behavior and the invisible predator controlled lives without ever being seen. Stories of the killer circulated in pubs, theaters, and homes, creating a city in which imagination and terror intertwined seamlessly, each reinforcing the other. London's streets were now haunted not just by a murderer, but by the omnipresent shadow of terror he cast across society. The citizens of London demanded action. Public meetings, letters to newspapers, and constant chatter in local pubs created immense pressure on authorities. People wanted answers, wanted justice, and wanted reassurance that they could walk home safely. The police faced not only the challenge of finding the Ripper but also the scrutiny of an anxious populace. Letters poured in, some helpful, many misleading. The press fueled outrage by reporting gruesome details and criticizing the efficiency of law enforcement. Social gatherings became forums for discussion of suspects, motives, and failures of the system. Citizens feared for their families and neighbors, often locking themselves in their homes and avoiding streets altogether. The Ripper had become more than a criminal, he was a symbol of societal vulnerability, a reminder that violence could erupt anywhere, at any time. London had transformed into a city under siege, not by armies, but by an invisible predator whose identity remained a mystery, and whose presence dictated the rhythm of daily life. As months passed without capture, Jack the Ripper transformed from criminal to legend. The fear he instilled became inseparable from his identity. Londoners spoke of him in hushed tones, the streets themselves becoming a symbol of danger and suspense. Stories spread beyond Whitechapel, into other boroughs and even overseas, turning a local tragedy into an international fascination. Artists, writers, and journalists immortalized the Ripper in sketches, stories, and illustrations. Every murder had been calculated yet mysterious, leaving authorities unable to anticipate his next move. Public imagination filled the gaps, creating a mythic figure whose evil seemed boundless. Children grew up hearing stories of the Ripper, adults navigated streets cautiously, always aware that the unseen threat could appear at any moment. The legend overshadowed the reality, a series of brutal murders committed against vulnerable women. And yet, the fear and fascination intertwined, creating a cultural phenomenon that would endure for over a century, a testament to the power of the unknown and the human fascination with darkness. Despite exhaustive investigations, the Jack the Ripper case eventually went cold. No definitive suspect was ever caught, leaving London with a lingering sense of unease. Detectives documented everything meticulously, yet the evidence was insufficient to identify or prosecute the killer. The Ripper's anonymity allowed the legend to grow unchecked, transforming each murder into a symbol of terror and human vulnerability. Whitechapel slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, yet fear remained embedded in its streets. Generations would continue to recount the events, analyze the victims, and debate the identity of the murderer. The Ripper's actions exposed societal weaknesses, the vulnerability of women in poverty, the limitations of law enforcement, and the capacity for rumor to amplify fear. Over a century later, the name Jack the Ripper evokes horror, fascination, and endless curiosity. The East End may have recovered physically, but the psychological imprint of the Ripper persists, a chilling reminder that some shadows never fully dissipate. Even as fear persisted, public fascination with Jack the Ripper intensified. Londoners discussed every rumor, every theory, and every letter, trying to make sense of the incomprehensible. Cafes, pubs, and marketplaces buzzed with speculation. Debates ranged from the killer's social status to his potential identity. Newspapers, hungry for readers, published gruesome accounts with illustrations, adding fuel to the obsession. Artists and writers began to immortalize the Ripper in stories and sketches, blending fact and fiction. People were drawn to the darkness, unable to look away despite their terror. This fascination reflected both a human curiosity for mystery and a desire to exert control over the unknown by analyzing it. Children and adults alike heard the chilling tales, making the Ripper a cultural figure whose influence extended far beyond Whitechapel. The city had become a stage for fear, curiosity, and imagination, where the shadow of a single, unknown figure held sway over the collective psyche. Each new headline, sketch, or story fed a cycle of horror and intrigue, solidifying the Ripper as an enduring figure in both history and folklore. Despite tireless efforts, mistakes and oversights hindered the investigation. Witness statements were inconsistent, evidence mismanaged, and leads misinterpreted. The limitations of 19th-century forensic science meant that crucial clues went unnoticed. Detectives relied on intuition, experience, and rudimentary crime scene documentation, yet the Ripper's cunning often outpaced their best efforts. Newspapers sensationalized errors, further eroding public confidence in law enforcement. Rumors about the identity of the killer multiplied, with innocent men harassed or detained based on flimsy evidence. This combination of investigative shortcomings and media pressure created a perfect storm in which the killer's legend could grow. Citizens were both terrified and frustrated, aware that someone so dangerous walked among them without consequence. The Ripper's ability to remain undetected highlighted the gap between perception and reality, the limits of authority, and the vulnerability of society's most marginalized members. Each misstep in the investigation added layers to the mystery, reinforcing the Ripper's aura as an almost supernatural figure who eluded capture with chilling ease. Letters claiming to be from the Ripper had a profound psychological effect. The infamous From Hell letter, among others, taunted the police and captivated the public imagination. Scotland Yard struggled to determine authenticity, while newspapers published every word, feeding hysteria. The letters created an illusion of communication with the killer, giving him a voice beyond the darkness of the alleys. Citizens became hyper-aware of strangers, shadows, and unexplained noises, as each day brought the possibility of another attack. The letters reinforced the narrative of an intelligent, methodical predator, enhancing the Ripper's legendary status. Their impact extended beyond immediate fear. They shaped cultural memory, turning the Ripper into an archetype of the mysterious, elusive criminal. In a society already fraught with poverty, inequality, and fear, these letters amplified anxiety, leaving an enduring impression on Londoners who felt powerless to stop the unseen menace. Jack the Ripper became more than a criminal, he evolved into an urban legend. Tales of his cunning and brutality spread through pubs, theaters, and marketplaces, creating a mythology that intertwined with reality. Each murder contributed to the narrative, with the media embellishing, witnesses speculating, and the public imagining ever-worsening scenarios. Londoners adopted precautionary measures, traveling in groups, locking doors earlier, and avoiding isolated streets. Children grew up hearing stories of the Ripper's shadow, a spectral presence lurking in the mist. The legend became a lens through which society interpreted fear, crime, and vulnerability. The East End streets were no longer just physical spaces but psychological battlegrounds where fear reigned. Jack the Ripper's name carried both terror and fascination, a story repeated and adapted over generations, ensuring that the shadow of 1888 would never truly fade. Despite decades of research, Jack the Ripper's identity remains unknown. Scholars, detectives, and amateur historians have proposed countless theories, yet none have provided conclusive proof. The mystery endures because of the combination of brutal crimes, meticulous planning, and the societal context of Victorian London. Each victim's story is preserved not just in police files but in the collective memory of a city forever marked by terror. The legend of Jack the Ripper has influenced literature, art, and popular culture, highlighting the enduring human fascination with the unknown. Whitechapel, once a district of unimaginable fear, has become a symbol of both vulnerability and resilience. The case represents the limitations of human understanding, the fragility of social order, and the enduring grip of mystery on our imagination. Jack the Ripper is more than a murderer, he is a shadow that continues to haunt history, a chilling reminder that some enigmas remain unsolved, and that the darkness of human ingenuity and cruelty can linger long after the streets have emptied. While the legend of Jack the Ripper has dominated history, the stories of the victims themselves are often overshadowed. Marion Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, these women were more than names in a police ledger. They were lives filled with dreams, struggles, and the harsh realities of the East End. Poverty, societal neglect, and vulnerability shaped their lives, making them targets in a world indifferent to their suffering. Each murder was a tragedy, a personal story cut short by a brutal hand. Modern historians and writers have worked to restore their identities beyond the anonymity of headlines, giving voice to the silenced and recognizing the humanity that was denied in life. Memorials and research projects honor their memory, emphasizing that history is not just about the criminal but also the lives he destroyed. Remembering the victims is essential to understanding the full weight of the Ripper's crimes, and it reminds us that behind every legend is real human suffering. The identity of Jack the Ripper has fueled endless speculation for over a century. Experts, amateur detectives, and conspiracy theorists have proposed countless suspects, ranging from local residents to nobility, doctors, and immigrants. Some theories suggest a skilled professional, while others imagine a psychologically disturbed individual seeking notoriety. Modern forensic techniques have been applied retrospectively, including DNA analysis, yet no definitive conclusions have emerged. The Ripper's anonymity allowed imagination to fill the gaps, creating a cultural mythos that persists globally. This speculation has kept the case alive in popular consciousness, influencing books, films, and television. Each theory reflects more than curiosity, it demonstrates society's need to impose order on chaos, to understand evil by humanizing it or categorizing it. The fascination with Jack the Ripper endures because the mystery challenges our understanding of morality, crime, and society itself. Every theory invites debate, discussion, and reflection, ensuring that the shadow of 1888 continues to captivate minds worldwide. Jack the Ripper's crimes and the ensuing legend continue to resonate through history. The East End streets, once fraught with terror, now serve as a reminder of society's vulnerabilities and the consequences of neglecting the marginalized. The case challenges historians, criminologists, and the public to confront questions about justice, morality, and human nature. The Ripper's anonymity amplifies the horror, making him a symbol of unknown evil that lurks within ordinary life. Beyond the fear and fascination, his story emphasizes the importance of remembering the victims, understanding the social context, and learning from the failures of the past. Over a century later, the name Jack the Ripper evokes both dread and curiosity, inspiring literature, film, and academic study. He is a figure whose influence transcends his crimes, leaving an indelible mark on history and culture. As we walk the foggy streets of memory, the shadows of 1888 remind us that some mysteries endure because they illuminate the dark corners of human existence and societal neglect. Jack the Ripper remains unsolved, but his story continues to captivate, warn, and teach, ensuring that the lessons and terror of his era are never forgotten.